Hi guys, welcome back to the Improvement Season podcast. It is me, Steve Hall. On the other end, Pascal Floor. We've returned alive from Vienna. We didn't kill ourselves in DASgym.
We can actually straight go into the topic then, because at one point when you actually recorded a voice message after the weekend, you said like, whenever I'm actually training at a different location or gym, I have the feeling that I can't really train to that given 1 or 0 area or to that given area. And this is actually what I've noticed myself as well, because as soon as I got back to my gym, I even tested some of the things, which I also want to touch on here on this podcast episode. But what I've realized is when I've pushed it in my gym, I had such a better connection with the machines, such a better connection within the movements, and also I was way more accurate in regards to the RER. And this is something where then I tested myself, and that I then took, for example, set number 2 to complete failure, where I then even couldn't perform an entire more rep or so, right? So halfway stopping, so basically very much failure.
Concentric or momentary muscular failure, whatever.
Just to really get the confirmation for myself of like, am I just shitting myself, or am I really hitting like 1 or 0 RER here? And then going for it, and then, all right, no, this is actually it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, Steve, and what your initial thoughts were when you shared that with me, because I didn't reply to you on this one in the voice message, and I completely forgot to talk about this.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that. Like, I don't even know where to necessarily begin, but one immediate example comes to mind where me and Mike went on to the pendulum squat. And I've used pendulum squats before, but I've never used this specific pendulum squat. And so I think someone watching from the outside, or at least I will say from in the set itself, some of these reps I was doing, I was like, that feels like a 2 RER, because I was aiming for, me and Mike were around 2 RER for this. And I was like, that felt kind of like a 2 RER, but it also could have been like a 4 or 5 RER, because I'm not used to kind of how much I can grind on this pendulum. Like on my pendulum in Yorkies, the Watson one, you can't grind on that fucker. Like it just, like you hit a wall. And actually I did that shit test with Jason not that long ago, where he was like, let's just take this set to failure. And I got it actually bang on. But on this one, there was more grindability. So I said to Mike afterwards, I was like, that felt really hard, but it could have been like 5 RER. I actually just don't, like, I know it was in that zone of like hard, which I think relieves a lot of like worries for people if they're like, oh my God, like you guys are advanced, you don't even know where your RER is. It was a completely new movement. So it was just, even if it's the same machine, example, like if I was doing a pendulum, if I came in and did this pendulum, they're different enough that I don't know how kind of close I would have been to where I wanted to be. And in the end, that's why I was just like, I'm auto-regulating my kind of, in a sense, I was kind of following you guys and auto-regulating like the amount I'm doing, and just making sure I know I've got a good stimulus within that session versus knowing I'm bang on. Because it's like you said, I think the easier thing would have been if we all went in there and like took it to momentary muscular failure, then there's no concerns about it. But when you're trying to like, leave some in the tank, particularly I find on legs, upper body, not so much, because I just think it's a little bit easier to gauge versus lower body, where like a lot of it could be mental. And again, different machines, they kind of just test you a little bit differently.
No, absolutely. That's also what I've experienced there. And also, to be fair, when you are doing a different move, or it's the same movement, but on a different machine, the movement pattern can, even though that it may be just slightly different, it can be it's just more so an assumption from a neurological perspective, be too different so that the movement pattern is a little bit off and you're not primed for that movement, and you have to get acclimated to then that movement pattern to have the most efficient outcome. And that's just more like an assumption of mine. But if you just consider what motor unit skills are, it's kind of that repetitive thing over a long period of time, and you get better at doing then this movement. And if you're then, for example, the leg curls and also leg extension machines were completely different to how I'm doing things in the gym, and they didn't really feel great to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I think of it, I think about cycling around a course or driving around a course. Like when you've driven that course many times, you almost can kind of you're a bit in an ultra instinct kind of state,
Yeah.
and you can take the turn before the turn comes because you know when it's coming. But if you've never driven that course before, you're like, ah, shit, it's here. Oh, shit, here. You can't go full pelt. So that's the way I think it, like you said, they're very similar, but sometimes they can be that little bit different where you're just like, I got to like feel this out. And it just felt a little bit off. It didn't feel, and that might be why things didn't feel as, I think we all went in there with the thought of like, everything's going to be feeling overwhelmingly amazing. Yeah. Whereas actually I was like, that doesn't feel quite as good as what I'm used to, or at least for us. Mike was a little bit different for legs because he's unfortunately stuck on some not so great equipment.
Yeah, but also this brings me then to the next topic, and that is it was very, very different on the exposure that we guys had to then a certain movement and the machines. There were so many machines where then I very much enjoyed those and you guys didn't necessarily that much. And then on the other hand was like the machines that were great for you guys, I was just like, nah, doesn't really work for me at all.
Yeah, that was really good as like a coaching, a learning moment as a coach, because I think sometimes, especially on social media, like I don't know, especially in this day and age where it seems to be that kind of, I guess, like biomechanics movement where it's like, oh, this like, and people, like, this become a bit of a joke now where it's like, oh, if you're 1 degree out, it's no longer as optimal as something else. It's like, well, we can literally do the same movement and be like, that one doesn't feel great, this one feels amazing. It's like, but we're physically very, very similar. But those little deviances, and even when we're doing our form, like for leg press, I have to go, if I use the same stance as you, I just like come into myself, like my hips are just in a way where I need to go wider, I need to put my feet out more. Whereas if you took my stance, maybe that would just feel like all in your adductors and in your glutes or whatever. So it's like you got to find, and that's why as coaches, we're both, and sometimes this can feel like a laser response. When your clients send you a form check-in, you're like, I'll say something like, it looks great from the outside in, or maybe I do this, but how does it feel to you? Because it's so important to get that, especially from people who've been training for a while. You're not going to give that to a novice because they don't have a kind of Scoobies what they're feeling. But someone who's like intermediate advanced, they know very well how they should be performing it. And if you put them into a box of, no, this is like the optimal way to perform it, or no, you must do this specific movement because it's on paper the best. If it feels terrible to your physiology, that feedback you're getting, it just feels, you just get like aches and pains or whatever it is. Like that's the difference for us. Like I get a great stretch on like my quad on this leg extension. You're like, man, it just felt all in my knees or whatever. And it's just like, it's that great proof in the pudding. I guess this is also why it's like some people will have the argument of like, do these people train people? Because when you train people, you get this kind of individual difference between everyone where it's like, you got to really listen to that individual and their response.
It always sounds though that people who are bringing up kind of those biomechanics or the arguments that they are bringing up, that we are against that, because that isn't really the case. And I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole to then talk about biomechanics or a specific route. But we've talked a lot about it over the weekend as well, just because of our observations. Once again, that just confirmed a lot of my beliefs around the current arguments being thrown around. And it kind of was the confirmation that once again, just I needed, and I wasn't really looking for confirmation bias or so, right? Because I'm very much open then to be proven wrong. And that kind of also takes me to another point then. I don't know if you have anything else to say about kind of the biomechanic kind of thing or so, Steve?
Just one thing, and that's to reiterate what you said in terms of like, it would be like to say you're against biomechanics. Like it's such a, like if people think through what that statement would mean, it just is so dumb of a statement because like everything you do in the gym is biomechanics. And in fact, I think it's just, if we're against anything, it's being dogmatic with the way that you're using it. And that to me is an inappropriate way to use kind of biomechanic inference for exercise selection or programming. So yeah, anyway, that's the only other additional point.
No, very well put. And what I wanted to say then is, because I always like to shit test myself, it's something that we've brought up now in the beginning as well, and also kind of challenge my own beliefs and what I deem as appropriate in the given moment, because I don't really want to be that dogmatic person who falls into his own traps of beliefs and then gets too stuck in your own way. And so over the weekend, what I've then thought about, and that's why I appreciate those kind of weekends so much, and also then training with other people, is kind of twofold. First off, I came back and I thought like I need to take a deload afterwards. It turns out that I actually feel good and I can keep on going, right? This is something that I did in the past often. However, sometimes I wonder whether I called it quit too early and I could easily push for longer. And funny enough, I even said like a couple of weeks ago, you remember when I said like, okay, I should just time it with the family because they are always getting sick every kind of 4 to 6 weeks anyway. Tony is right now very, very sick at home, coughing very heavily. And I was at home yesterday, the entire day, just with him. And I can already feel like a tingling in my throat. And I was just like, all right. So I had a rest day here today because I thought if something comes up, then maybe I can avoid it a little bit longer. I'm already now week 5.5. 5? Yeah, something like this, 5.5 or 5. Can't really say, need to actually bring up my spreadsheet. Anyway, but I could feel like, okay, maybe something is coming up, but in it for itself, I'm feeling good. So what I will do for this mesocycle is now, first and foremost, just prolong the mesocycle for as long as my body is giving me the clear signals to. And then secondarily, what I will try is to push more sets, I think, to failure more often. And this is more like an experiment. Hear me out. And I'm very interested to hear your thoughts around this, because I think that we came from a perspective where we've trained to failure quite often, especially my powerlifting days. I thought that I'm actually training to kind of RP of 7 or 8, but when I now look back, I always grind it hard, you know? And that's why I always kind of pushed way too hard all the time. So that was never really the issue. However, over the past couple of years, my training style has changed. So I transitioned from powerlifting way more over to bodybuilding. And also, I then ramped up the volume over a long period of time. And my lifting technique was shit. My muscle connection was shit. I was never really training and practicing the muscle groups, but more so like going in, moving the weight from A to B. And that has completely changed over the past 3-4 years, something like this. Now I wonder what it will look like with the skills that you have right now. And that is something that I can't really say with 100% certainty. I don't know what it is that I can recover from if I now keep my volume the same, but then push the intensity maybe up and try to maintain it over a longer period of time. And that is something that I want to experiment with here over the next couple of weeks, maybe even month, and just see what my body's actually telling me. Because I think that I fell victim of thinking, all right, I need to progress now via RER because I can't recover from that. But I think that this is just the person who has never really given it a true, honest thought about the current situation. And the context and the situation has completely changed. So I need to challenge myself now to get some new data, new facts that I then can take advantage of and then move forward. Does that make sense? And what do you think about this?
I think I need you to give me a practical example. Because I'm interpreting it as you're potentially reducing and capping your set volume and working at a higher relative intensity.
Okay. So that's not what I'm doing.
Okay. There you go.
So I will just give you a rundown. The program that I'm doing right now feels to me very efficient. So the set volume and all the kind of stuff. I get good pumps, good stimulus. The exercises that I'm doing are feeling great. However, when it comes to then the RER progression, I then start off with 2 to 4 RER, depending on the exercise at the first week, and then progress throughout the mesocycle. However, we also know that sometimes so it is very psychologically demanding to always push to 0 and 1 RER. I think if you really want to get to that point, you will quickly burn out. Not just from a systemic perspective, but also psychological perspective, because you really have to then stay focused, stay concentrated, and especially on those heavy lifts, man, it's a challenge. And if you need to do this like 6 times out of the week with nearly each and every single exercise, I think it's just too draining. What I want to do though,
have to be so low.
Exactly. And what I was thinking is keeping the sets the same, but really having the starting RER, so the starting relative intensity being a little bit lower, maybe somewhere around like 0 to 2 or 3 RER, depending on the exercise. Because I think that something like dumbbell lateral raises or bicep curls, while yes, it may still be psychologically demanding, I can probably still go there. And then having this as a starting point, and then progress over the next weeks with a relative intensity. But of course, when some of the exercises are already at a 0 or 1 RER, keep them there, always go there. And then with the heavier compound lifts, for example, then progress slower or closer and closer to then the 1 and 0 RER. So have basically a lower RER, beginning RER, being closer to failure, because the only reason why I had it a little bit higher is because I was convinced that I can't recover from that in the mesocycle. And in some cases, it's probably true when you're deep in a cutting phase or so. But right now, I could potentially see that it is possible. And also this kind of, so I'm coming from a little bit more angles here, because if we just go back to the podcast episode that you've recorded with James Hoffman, he basically said something like, okay, sometimes people think that they have like 2 reps in reserve, but are actually at 4 reps in reserve. And when they are then progressing towards the last week, and what it is that they think is 0 or 1 RER is then 3 or 2 RER, which in it for itself, first then they are at that very much effective RER range for them. I think that I'm relatively close to what I can do when it comes to the RER, but at the same time, the biggest reason for me is always like the phrase that I had in my head that I can't recover from that. And I think that maybe I'm shitting myself. And this is something that I have to test out now. What are the circumstances like? What is my recovery like? In a situation like this, that I'm now capable of hitting my muscle groups appropriately, having good execution and technique, and also being a little bit more tuned in and zoned in, and being able to actually then push to that 0, 1, 2 RER more appropriately.
So I think if I was to put it really simply to how I understand it, you're just starting out a little bit closer to failure.
Yes.
Yeah, which I think is fair, and I agree with you on those smaller muscle groups. I think that could absolutely work fine, and I have a feeling the results, assuming everything was done properly, like if you're at 2 or 3 RER week 1 for like a lateral raise, you're not actually at 5 or 6 if you're actually doing it correctly. I imagine one scenario where you're leaving a few more in the tank might allow you to a little bit more volume, maybe an extra set or something, but then maybe that is made up by the intensity that you're giving, and that closer to failure. So in the end, maybe in one scenario, you're doing a little bit more volume for a little bit less relative intensity on average, whereas the other one, there's a bit more closer to failure, but a little bit less volume, and it kind of equals out. It'd be interesting to see how that goes for you. I think inherently, I hate to say it, sometimes I get into situations where I intend to leave like 3 reps in reserve, maybe week 1 for my lateral raise, but kind of in my last 2 weeks of the mesocycle, I'm like, Steve, you're trying to add a rep here and you really can't. And I'm kind of like at that 0 kind of RER. And this is what we spoke about, I think maybe last time on the podcast, where I was like, in that final week, if my clients' reps are all looking perfect up until the final rep, I'm like, I'm just not convinced you're quite taking it to where we need it to go. So I'm always wanting them to go a little, maybe even break technical failure in that final week to try and get that rep. So then I'm like, cool. Now you know you've worked hard enough. So I like that. Like it comes back to what you said about like shit testing yourself. It's just like seeing what you can do there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is where I'm coming from mostly, because I think that sometimes you're falling victim of getting comfortable. Not necessarily complacent, but sometimes these two are intertwined, getting comfortable and also complacent at the same time. And I haven't experimented in a long time with something like this. And I don't see that this is a detrimental experimentation where it's like, all right, I need to change everything, because sometimes the people who are very much in doubt about themselves, they don't see the progress because the progress is actually slow. They start doubting themselves, and then they are making like constant changes to the program. That's not where I'm coming from. I just need to confirm for myself of like, am I pushing hard enough? Have I been kidding myself? And also, just when I break my entire program down, I think that I'm doing sufficient amount of volume. I think that I'm doing sufficient amount of frequency for the right body parts. So the only question is then like, what am I not doing? Right? And I think that frequency and volume are quite quantifiable easily, but the intensity is more so something that you need to feel and need to experience. And that is something that I just need to do right now, where it's like, okay, with all of the variables that have changed and have been optimized over the past years, the things that I've talked about, my muscle connection, the awareness or execution of movements, what does it now look like in comparison to back then? Because do you remember the crowd who then always said that when you say like, okay, why aren't you doing like 2 sets or 3 sets per exercise? Because I can't recover from that. Bullshit. You've just watched too much JP because he's kind of doing a leg press on like, I don't know, 1,000 pounds or whatever, right? It's just an arbitrary number. Of course, he can't recover from 3 sets. But you, as a natty, who's just like, I don't know, leg pressing 1/5 of it, you can probably recover from 2 or 3 sets. Right? And this is where I'm coming from when it comes to the intensity. Because at some point we know that things will feel hard and heavy. It's just, are we working at that hard and heavy capacity where it's really kind of a challenge and you're causing that new disruption? Or is it just like inconveniently hard and heavy?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's similar to, I sometimes would handicap myself, for example, with like lateral delts. I would think, I'm hitting them through some of my compound lifts. I probably shouldn't do like more than 5 sets for the lateral delts in a single session, particularly for a single exercise. And I'm experimenting, pushing. I've never pushed my lateral delt volume this high, and I'm like, I'm still freaking recovering from it, and my shoulders still feel fine, my joints and like everything's still feeling fine. I'm like, man, I don't think I've ever pushed my lateral delt volume maybe high enough. So it comes back to what you said there, where we have these general principles we know we need to achieve. And what you could be doing, and we both agree, we don't like, if it's working, don't fix it. Yeah, I understand where people are coming from with that, but what if it could work better? And that's where we're both coming from with, we know what's working, what we're doing currently is working, but now and then it's nice to experiment, see if it could work even better. And that's something like we're experimenting with Mike, where we were doing a lower frequency, and I was like, let's use the same volume and go higher frequency and see what happens. And I've just pulled my frequency back for like chest and back, and I feel like I'm doing better with the lower frequency versus the higher frequency. My actual, like, if you look at my program just from like a numbers perspective, I don't think the volume's changed too much, but I feel the benefits of the program more. And then you come to the point of like, okay, so you can't actually assess things in a short term. Like, you have to look at, how do we assess progress? You have to look at, are you actually improving faster? I feel the program better. I am enjoying it more. And it's like, maybe it all just in the end works out that it's all providing the same and these little adjustments are doing fuck all. But it's nice to experiment, at least just from a adherence perspective and those sort of things, particularly like pushing my side delt volume higher than it's been before. I imagine I'm interested to see the results of that over months, but it will take a long time for us to see that.
You bring up a very, very interesting point there. When it comes to gauging progress, you will never really know what worked and what didn't. You can only go by like, okay, this feels good in the initial moment. This feels productive. Are the numbers kind of going up over a long period of time? Yes. All right. That is probably working, right? You will never really see it in your physique over a short period of time. And even in a long period of time, you can't really make the comparison because you can't go back in time and do just like the complete opposite of it. That's why it's very, very hard then to tell like, okay, this probably works better than this, unless you have kind of that biofeedback. And that's why I really do believe it's more a matter of listening to the productiveness of a session, the way that you feel after completing a session and maybe the days to follow, and also just looking at the numbers on your spreadsheet. And when those two things come together and feel good and look good, there's nothing really else to do other than putting in the work and effort over a long period of time. And that's also why this is also something that we've talked over the weekend. And this is something that I've picked up from Nathan PT. And it's not that I've heard it for the first time there, but it resonated with me because that's the way that I see things myself when it comes to exercise selection, for example, and creating your program. You have like a handful of exercises. At first, you have a lot of exercises. And it's kind of overwhelming. You have never really given it a try. So you are trying all of those movements, right? And then over time, you can actually narrow it down to a handful of exercises per body part that feel the best for you. And then once you are at that point, you will not really make a lot of changes to your program anymore. You will probably then shuffle around kind of 2, 3, maybe max 5 exercises or so for a particular plane of a movement, and then that's it, and that's, I think that many people who are then always kind of looking for, hey, why aren't we adding something to the mix or to the training protocol? Why aren't we changing something here for the next mesocycle? Because that's exactly what it is that you want. You want to find the movements that feel best for you, that feel the most productive for you. That takes a little bit of time, and once you are there, you don't really want to shuffle things around any longer, or at least very, very rarely.
Yeah, it's like, I don't agree with the premise of, again, like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, don't make any changes, but it's little tweaks to keep it feeling very good and productive. And I particularly like, you mentioned the kind of those short-term proxies in terms of, are you feeling like you've done good work? Are you getting a good SFR, that kind of in-session stimulus of pump disruption, and you're not feeling just like a train wreck from the exercise? You're not feeling it all in your knees and joints. I think that combination of using those in the short term to make those short-term adjustments, and then I think if you get those kind of in a productive way, in the longer term, I tend to see that provide better results and better performance improvements. But it's like you said, there's no short-term measurement of that because we don't improve on a weekly basis. We improve on a month by monthly. Like for some people, it would be 3 months until they can hit a PR, especially on like some of these lateral raise movements or something. So you have to use something in the short term to give you kind of a bit of a diagnostic and something to work with. So yeah, that's kind of comes back to the podcast with James where we talked about SFR and everything like that. And I do find that helps.
No, absolutely.
I was only going to say one thing, Pascal.
Yeah.
What did Mike surprise you at all in his grindability?
Yes. It is. Sometimes it was kind of very shocking because I was just like, all right, that's it. And then he's squeezing out like 4 or 5 more repetitions. And I'm like, so it's also funny because you at one point mentioned that we are very similar in the way that we are training partners, right? We're very calm. We don't really give the other person kind of cues or anything alike. We're not shouting at them. And Mike is the complete opposite. And then I was standing there at times. I'm like, yeah, Mike, you got it. You got it. Come on, 1 more rep. And then I thought it's it. And then next rep. Come on, Mike, 1 more rep. Come on, Mike, 1 more rep. Come on, Mike, 1 more rep. And it didn't stop.
Yeah, it's that's what I struggled with it with Mike to encourage him because I was like, actually, I got it as we were training more. I was like, okay, so I know when I think he looks like he's at like 4 RAR where he starts slowing down, he's actually about 6. So then I start working, and obviously Mike's my client. I've seen his form videos. I knew this is kind of how things go. But it's one thing seeing the form videos and then in real life seeing it, and I was just like, man, this is... Yeah, so don't start encouraging him when he slows down. Encourage him after a couple of reps after slow down. Yeah. And then, so yeah, I think from the outside in, people would look at Mike and like, well, he can just kind of, what looks like a 0 RAR rep to us, he can repeat that performance for another 2 reps.
But this is once again also there. I think it was such a perfect example over the weekend to see the different responses to then machines, but also the different way that we are actually then pushing to some kind of area or given area. Because for me, it's kind of, I can tell, like, all right, this is the next one will be kind of either a grinder that will look very, very disgusting, or I will start to use either momentum, or there's too much of a form breakdown, or something like this. And some movements you can't really kind of have too much of a deviation from form because the machine or the exercise doesn't really allow to. We know it, like pulling movements or pulling off the floor, you can easily grind things out because your form just goes to shit. When it comes to pressing movements, it's getting a little bit more challenging, you know? And this is where I'm just like, I go, and then I'm hitting a wall. Whereas Mike is kind of, he's more like a snail, you know? Like, they're ever so slowly. I'm the rabbit, right? Off to the finish line, and he's just the snail. He keeps on going, enjoys the view and all that kind of stuff.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We create the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
But I think that actually brings us back to the point that James made about how some people are sandbagging, where they're only just like in their final week, where like things just slow down and they're like, oh yeah, that was naught RER. It's like, well, no, that's kind of 3 or 4 for you. That's not naught RER. So I think if people are more similar to Mike, they could be leaving stuff in the tank, whereas we've worked together because I have shit tested Mike so many times where I'm just like, come on, let's go. Do we really need this much volume? Are you training hard enough? And no, he can not only grind, but his volume requirements are a good 25% more than the average easily. So it's very interesting just seeing the differences there and being in that gym and being with each other, seeing that in real time.
Yeah. One thing that I want to just mention is because of the failure point and so, right? Just because I forgot to mention it, we have that system in place where it's kind of the reverse engineering method. And this way you can actually kind of have a very good understanding of what 3, 4, 2 RER in the first week looks like. But I think it doesn't really hurt to at times then just also in the last week go to absolute failure where it's like you can't even complete the rep, which I started doing as well here once again this week, last week, which just to see whether you are truly there or not. And especially something I remember the leg curls that I did here yesterday was exactly this. I tried because I was like, maybe I'm kidding myself. And then I couldn't really get the weight up, you know?
Do you find you have to be a bit careful about when you do it? So if I'm just thinking about it, if an exercise I know would just destroy me if I hit momentary muscular failure or something like hack squats, even like a naught RER on hack squat is just like, oh, it's horrendous. So if I did that, say it was the first session of my week, hack squats, set 1, let's go complete utter failure. I'm pretty sure that would have a knock-on consequence, not just for that session, but maybe following. So do you have a way of maybe leaving it to the last set for that muscle group for that session, or pushing it towards more the final sessions of that mesocycle?
Oh yeah. I would still be more so on the side of the safety and conservatism. Because if you do it for like one set and that it's the last set for that given muscle group, maybe, then it's probably not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
And it always depends on the way that you can recover per set and how much it kicks your ass. Because I do remember when we were in DASgym and we did the hacks and then moved over to the leg press, I was already kind of quite fried after then the leg press sets. And then we still needed to do leg extensions, leg curls, what else did we do? Hyper extensions, all that kind of stuff, you know? And I was like, I can just feel that my legs don't have a lot, at least when it comes to knee flexion movements, a lot in them anymore. It feels just, the tank is empty. And I think everyone kind of knows what this feels like, when it's just like, you try to produce strength and force, but there's nothing really there.
I definitely did some junk volume for legs and also for chest, for pressing. And I saw that it was really evident with pressing because me and Mike went to do the cambered bar press and I wanted to do it with him. And I don't know, you want to do the sets they're doing. So I just matched him, but I was much weaker than him on that.
Yeah.
And I'm a stronger presser. Like all the other movements before that, I was stronger. So I was like, I think it's just fact my chest is done. Like I just can't perform. Whereas he was still like, he had that endurance, he could still perform because he just, again, needs that much more volume than me. Yeah. And it was the same with leg press. I did one set on that leg press because I was like, if I do another set, I won't be able to do any more quad movements this entire session. And that was 4 sets that would have been because that was 2 sets on hacks. So yeah, it comes back to, again, a lot of people can get a lot more out of their sets.
But also this, I think, was a valuable experience for you probably and a valuable confirmation of, am I really doing sufficient amount of volume or could I possibly do more? And because when we have a preconception about something, often we are not really then challenging that preconception anymore in the future. Because it could then very well be, I can't recover from that because it's going to be junk volume. And if we're not testing this every now and then how can we be certain that we really are there? And I think that just that we can alone, once again, confirm to you that you don't need much more.
It was great. It also confirmed the utility of the acute proxies in terms of pump and disruption, because my pump and disruption for both quads and chest, as we kept going, actually started to reduce as we kept going. I do like a set of like, we did some of the like leg extensions right at the end just because we found it and I tried it and I was like, yeah, it feels good. But then it immediately went and I was just like, man, it was the best after like 4 sets and now I'm 8 sets deep and it's just started dropping. And so the same with chest. So it gave me a good insight into like, okay, if I am thinking, should I do more? And then I do a set and I'm like, actually things are plateauing, if not feeling worse in terms of those short-term proxies. It's probably not a good idea because without Mike, I wouldn't have known my performance was poor on the cambered bar press. So I could have used those short-term proxies though when I came off and be like, oh, my chest just feels a bit meh now. So let's not do it anymore. Yeah,
no. Some other things. This is always because, Steve, we've been together since now close to 6 years.
Mad.
And whenever, it's absolutely crazy. I think you're the longest relationship that I ever had in my entire life.
Actually, no, that's
with my bandmates. Okay. It was a little bit longer. It was over 10 years.
We'll get there.
But what I wanted to say is, whenever we then meet in real life, right? I always, and that has been the case since we know each other. Always am I thinking like, man, Steve is way bigger than. First, I anticipate and expect, and I think that many, many people online expect and anticipate as well.
I appreciate that.
And that is always kind of, and the level of conditioning that you're then able to still carry through the off season always kind of blows my mind. It's crazy, and it's always, I envy you for this, like very much, and I'm always kind of then, man, I will never catch up to Steve.
Well, it's hard because I'm also trying to push as much as I can to stay ahead of the curve, and I need to with every kind of how everyone, all the competitors coming up. But I appreciate the kind words. I will also say, whenever I see you, Pascal, I'm always drawn to your quads even when you're like, this sounds really weird, even when you're wearing jeans, like the slightly skinny jeans, I was like, man, you just have nice like shape to your legs. I was just like, mine just don't look this way. Why not?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of then we could sit here and kind of envy both of us, right? Because I envy your upper body, just the size and then the conditioning. And whenever because we've talked about it, how much I'm weighing now more than when I've competed. And it's now, I weighed myself in the morning. It was here in the morning, 77.7 kilograms. So this is more than 5.5 kilograms up, which doesn't really sound like a lot. But if you think about it, because you're always kind of doing things in pounds, right?
Yeah.
But in kilograms, it sounds like a pathetic amount. But in reality, it's over 12 pounds. What is it? 13, 14 pounds already. And I wasn't my very, very leanest. So probably from the leanest stage, I'm still probably off like 17, 18 pounds now already. Right. And I'm looking at myself and I'm just like, oh man, this is pathetic in comparison to you guys. But it's probably also then it's hard because we haven't had the same starting point. You're training so much longer than I have. And this is then hard to always remind yourself about in the given situation. You may feel bad about yourself, but then in reality, especially bodybuilding, is about kind of volume and time. And this I have from Alex Gamozzi, or what he's called, because it really applies to every skill in life. It's a matter of volume and time. So how often you do something and for how long. Yeah. And if you want to develop a skill, then you need to actually then have a lot of volume over a long period of time. And that then applies here as well. I have not as much volume as much volume times time equals then X, right? I don't have that X as you or someone like Mike, because I was asking him, like, how long have you been training for? And he has been training since the age of 16, which is also then 16 years, right? And that's, that is something that I don't have. And I think that this is also something that many people overlook. They take a look at someone like you, right? And think like, man, I want to look like this in 3 years as well.
You should see me after 3 years. That
probably doesn't happen, and it's easy to forget about this when you're then standing also next to someone like this, because the years don't really sound like a lot. If we just compare your training years of experience with mine, this discrepancy doesn't really sound like a lot, but in itself, 1 year equals a lot of training volume.
And also, well, specifically with you, if we think about like our improvement season since competing last year, you had an extended period of maintenance due to your chest surgery. Yeah. And that was pre-chest surgery and post. That was months of time.
Yeah, that's true.
So I imagine your actual improvement season since even competing has been half the time mine has been.
Yeah.
And so I've done a mini cut in that time and you haven't. I actually think we're almost at the same point in terms of, I might look a little bit more conditioned than you, but I think it's just muscle mass related versus anything else. I think actually, like you said, your hamstrings and glutes still kind of like popping, which is crazy. But that's like one of your nice lean areas. And so actually, I think you're in a great spot for how your timeline's been, which again, it's that thing. People only see the highlight reel. They see the outside. They don't know everything's going behind the scenes there. And some people are having injuries, other things like this. I can say thankfully, since I started, I've had a pretty smooth ride, and I spent fuck all time doing powerlifting. Like there was maybe a year spent powerlifting, but the rest of the time was like almost pure bodybuilding style training.
And that's something that I'm always, so because it's so easy, it's like the people who say like, you only live once and that's why you need to live every day as if it's your last. Who fucking lives like that? Like, honestly, I'm not getting up in the morning and think like, this could be my last day, so I need to do everything that I possibly can, right? You have obligations, you're falling into like that vicious or normal, typical routine cycle. And that's the same thing here. I'm not constantly reminding myself that in terms of bodybuilding, I've been only doing this since like 5 years, from which like first, the last 3 to 4 have been relatively productive. And it's so easy to forget about this.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's the same for a lot of people kind of listening. And actually something you brought up, which I think is worthwhile for the listeners too, is kind of comparing our condition. And obviously you looked at me and you're kind of like, I wish I could look like that in my off season. I know there was a point where we spoke about kind of, you kind of asked me, what am I not doing? And I was like, maybe just not, I don't know, the surplus type of thing. And you mentioned how like it's hard because the more weight you put on at this point, like I'm lucky in my off season, I tend to actually kind of look better when I put weight on. I don't know if it's my structure or whatever, and where I put weight on kind of evenly. So I kind of look conditioned, but other people like yourself, maybe when you put weight on, like it's the cost of doing business, but it can be hard, especially I think for someone like yourself, Pascal, where you've always been on that kind of more, I guess, softer side and extreme, and you've come and fought yourself to this really good position that you're in now. But it's like, to get that muscle, you have to push through this like kind of uncomfortable like look that you're not wanting. And I know I'm going to have to push, like I like how I look now, but I know if I want to really pack on the size, I need to push past like 200 pounds maybe. I'm like, I know I'm not going to be looking good at that point, or at least in my head.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely. I can't deny that. And that is something though, that I don't admit to myself the entire time, because it's kind of like one is overpowering the other. What it is that I see right now is something that I like. So it isn't as much that I like this look as I did when we both were lean. This was kind of like where I said, oh, man, this looks great. Love to look like this all the time. And unfortunately, I am still at the position where I don't have enough muscle mass. And this is something that we've talked about in one of the latest Improvement Season podcasts as well. The more muscle mass you have, the more often you went through a cyclical phase of like getting lean, gaining, getting lean, gaining, the better you look at a higher body fat as well, because you're carrying more muscle mass. And even if you then have more chop overall, you still look buff and big. Yeah. We met Alexander, for example. He looked great. And he said it himself. He's right now, same as you, at a point where he's like, I really have to push right now in terms of then body weight, and it's getting hard to get the food in and all that kind of stuff, But he looked great. And that's something I think is hard. It's hard for a lot of people to accept that look. And it's like you said, it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think that many, many, many people, besides putting in the time, this is one of the most common reasons why people probably never really achieve the physique that they want, because they never allow themselves to get in that uncomfortable position to then reap the rewards in the future. And I have to be honest, this is also something where I'm struggling with all the time, right? And this is probably also due to a lot of reasons from my background, the way that I perceive myself, the way that I see myself daily as well. And there's no reason for me to find an excuse, because I know that what it is that you said is the truth and reality, and I don't need to find any kind of excuses why I'm looking the way that I do right now. Right?
Yeah, it reminds me of the position I was in after I first competed, because I pushed to 190 pounds, which looks completely different to how it looks now, and I was quite uncomfortable with that. I cut down, and then I kind of handicapped myself and didn't ever push above 180 pounds, which to me now seems just crazy. And then I started my prep, like it was like 10 pounds above stage condition. And I started like an elongated prep, and it was just like, oh man, you don't have much more muscle than you did since 2014. Your stage weight's basically the same. Yeah. You're just a bit more conditioned. And it wasn't until after that prep, I was like, man, I gotta eat. And it was getting through that barrier, which I think is why I ended up with 10 pounds more stage weight in 2021. But it's not an easy, like it's like it's easy to say it, and I need to kind of eat up, I need to push through it. But when you're on, like, if you're comfortable with your diet, you're happy with that, you're happy with how you're looking, training's going all right, you get, like you said, you get kind of comfortable. And you don't want to be too comfortable for too long, because then you get complacent and you kind of stall.
And not only that, not only do you, or may you feel good, psychologically speaking, but perhaps even physically, you're feeling better at a lower body fat. And then those two intertwined, makes it so much harder because you like your current looks, and also you don't really feel great when you are pushing your body weight a little bit higher because the body may not like it, right? And it doesn't make things any kind of easier. And I think the example from your 2014 to your 2017 show is the perfect example. And then the difference between there and then 2017 to 2021, you've put on way more muscle mass in the time between 2017 to 2021 in comparison to 2014 to 2017, even though you would definitely assume that it's the other way around.
Yeah. And I was the same. I remember just convincing you. It's so easy to convince yourself that it's fine. And I don't know, I would find everything that confirmed my bias, P ratios, and you don't need to be in a big surplus to gain muscle. And
look at the study here, right?
Yeah.
Confirming that you only need to be in a caloric surplus of like 200 to 300 calories because as a natty, you can't reconvert more or synthesize more muscle tissue. And so absolutely, this is also something that many people do when they are binging of like, hey, but I got in so many steps and that the calculator says that I'm expending such and such calories. The thermic effect of feeding also then kicks in, and I had so much more protein in here. And in reality, you're just getting fat.
Yeah. That's the kick. Like, what's actually happening? Like, you can theorize everything, but in real time, real life, like right now, what's going on?
Yeah,
it's easy,
and it's the other way around when it comes to muscle gaining. You're just kind of justifying your behavior and looking for all of the confirmation bias here. And in reality, nothing really is changing because you're putting no muscle mass on, or very, very little, and that's why you're not seeing the progress.
But I will say, I think I don't know if you're the same. I imagine you are, Pascal, with seeing, like, because all the finals have just gone, and obviously we talked about potentially reviewing things, and actually we got some positive feedback on that, which was that was cool to see in the comments, and also people are interested in a Q&A segment, I think. So we can always think about that. But I just wanted to notify those things. But seeing those shows happen, being in DASgym, being together, man, it's ignited a little bit of a flame to be like, man, I want to get back. I know I need the time away from stage, but it's so tempting even to think to compete next year.
Yeah.
Like, because it is really fun in a weird way.
For me, yes and no. I have it definitely that I'm just like, yeah, sure, let's compete again. But more so coming from a different perspective of the things that we've talked about in the past, of like, my deviation from them the last time isn't too huge. So why not jump now into a proper contest prep and then take the time to really go into a proper off-season? So for me, whenever we are getting together, and that has also been the case with the last London seminar, when I then sat between kind of you, Charlie, Jared, and Mike, I was just like looking around, taking a look at the pictures and the video recordings, and I see myself there looking tiny and super, super lean and skinny in comparison to you guys. And this, for me personally, always motivates me to then actually push. However, because that is not a consistent environment that I'm in, I always then kind of deviate from that. I think for me personally, if I were to be in an environment like this, or if we were together as training partners or in a gym like this, I think that I would have a much easier time to then gain weight and be comfortable with pushing my weight up, because I could see other people around me and I think it's looking great. And that kind of motivates me to then actually eat. Yeah. Whereas when I'm here by myself, the only exposure that I have is Instagram, and Instagram is just see lean individuals. You know, it's kind of the environment dictates often your behavior and what it is that is going on up in your head. And I think for me personally, whenever we are coming off of this, I'm more motivated to actually then gain and put on some mass instead of looking to actually be cutting also.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. And it, like, in the same way, I want to step on stage. I know I don't want to step on stage with a barely improved physique from last time, because I just look at the caliber of athletes. I was thinking about the UKFBA middle height class, and the winner of that won the British overall. Christopher actually won the overall of everything.
Yeah, shout out to Christopher. He's listening to those podcast episodes, so shout out to him.
Yeah, he looked... I didn't realize he was so tall. I was like, he's tall? So I didn't think he was tall, which actually I think says a lot about his size if he doesn't look as tall. So yeah, he was in the tall class. But I was looking at the mediums and I was like, man, I'm not even sure I'd place in the top 5 there. Because I know people who placed outside of the top 5. I'm like, I don't know if I'd beat this individual.
Yeah.
So in the same instance, I'm like, Steve, you've got your work cut out to try and fight amongst
this year, the UK shows were just absolutely ridiculous. In a good sense.
Yeah.
Probably better than most world lineups.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Worlds is like this year. Hopefully more competitive, more people there.
Yeah.
Alberto's
It's also something
there.
that we've talked about for most people, especially during the pandemic times, was a little bit more of a risk to travel, to book things in advance. And that's why the world lineups in the past years weren't really that high on caliber. And perhaps it now changes again.
It's like you said, actually, because I think there were some classes from some federation, like I'm looking at the WNBF, BNBF, UKFBA and the UK. They're the 3 biggest. There's also the MPA. They don't seem to draw as big numbers and as competitive lineups. But particularly in the bodybuilding, I was like, man, if you could pick, like I would say the BNBF short class from my head was the most competitive. That was like unreal. But then the medium class at the UKFBA was crazy competitive. And then I don't know for the WNBF, maybe I don't actually know the tall class. Like there's people and lineups within each of these. I'm like, man, it's like you said, if we could get the Champions League and then bring all of the top from each of these feds and put them into one, the Revive Stronger like finals, whatever. Oh man, I can't even imagine. It's kind of like having David K and Nathan PT. Like that's like whoa. But imagine having all these superstars, like the elite that are winning these kind of finals all at one. I can't see it happening. This is what Worlds should be, WNBF Worlds, I guess. That's what you're trying to pull is like the best of the best from every country. But there's so many logistical things into that as well. It's like it's a long way to go, and it extends your prep as well for a lot of people if you're not planning for it. So yeah, it's exciting times for sure for bodybuilding. I think in terms of like, I think it was a recent thing about bodybuilding being dead, and I think during COVID, sure, but it seems like it's back alive now.
Yeah, I mean, it was before all of those shows took place. And I think that this year, the natty bodybuilding shows have completely disproven that point of like whether bodybuilding is that or not. I think that this year has just been or had some very, very insane lineups and shows.
You showed me a German competitor who I think is an IFBB pro now.
Patrick Teutsch.
This guy. What's his name?
Patrick Teutsch.
This guy, Patrick, you are, if you're listening to this, I doubt you are. If someone sends this to him, he is unbelievable. I think the majority of listeners will think, nah, wait, he's natty. But,
yeah.
I mean, he is.
I mean, if it even makes you question as a long-term competitor, as a natty bodybuilding coach, and you're already kind of like, holy shit, this is hard to believe, you know? But this is what outliers are, you know? And this takes place in other sports as well, that at some point someone just shows up and completely just changes everything.
And the Doug Miller. He's like a Doug Miller type of look.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can then once again go into other sports, and there's always kind of at some point a phenomenon coming up where just like he makes then other professionals look like clowns.
Yeah.
So for example, I don't know, the person that I can think of right now is Messi when it comes to football. It looks like at the people that he's playing against are kind of, I don't know, amateurs.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Because he's just dribbling around them, and they are professional people, like making money off of that. And he just makes them look like, I don't know, they're his toys, you know? Yeah. And it's the same then. Why shouldn't it be in something like bodybuilding where it's highly dependent on genetics the same as well? And often you don't see those people in natty bodybuilding because they have what it takes to actually then go on gear, make it to the Olympian stage and make money off of that. Yeah. And that's why you hardly ever see calibers like this ending up as big as he is in natty bodybuilding.
Do you know his age?
I don't know, but I would assume he's probably like between 30, 32, 35, something like this, I would assume. Because he's now turning out to be 25. I'm sorry for this, Patrick.
Christopher's like 24 or something. Yeah. I'm just like, man, it's crazy to see. But this is why it's quite nice being in our position where we kind of understand that, and we can be like it. We just find it fun and interesting. It's not like we get demoralized by it. It's just like, man, that's so cool that that exists, that freak, and that he didn't go into the enhanced side or to be a rugby player or a football player, because that kind of physique, that power that he would bring to those sports where you could earn a lot more, I imagine would be a pretty cool thing. Actually, you see, I think there's Mitch Jarvis, I think his name is. He's a UK FBA competitor. He came from like gymnastics.
Last year he competed, right?
Yeah, he competed, I think, maybe the year before that or something, but then he won the pro class. It's just like, he was in gymnastics, I think he got an injury, and then he's come into bodybuilding and just been like, just come walking through and being a pro, and it's like, wow. Yeah. Like, it's just, the human body is amazing.
Yeah. And that's why it never really made sense to me, kind of unnatty claims and accusations. It's just, I mean, even if then it's kind of their problem to some extent. It's a shitty thing to be doing. But other than that, it's like, so what? People will forget about it in 10, 20 years anyway, if not even in the next year or 2 years or so, because we're such a small niche. And there will be just people like this. Yeah. Right? So, and unfortunately, we aren't.
No. Would we? The thing is, it's interesting. I don't know. It's like the best coaches are often not the best athletes. So I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm really fussed that I'm not there, because you get a few people like Terence Ruffin who comes to mind, where he does really try and educate himself. He follows the podcast, for example, which I think is amazing. But he's got like an elite physique. Crazy, right? Yeah. But there's not many who are at that level who seek that far of education. I don't think. They just kind of have a coach who they trust, and then they just do what's on paper. And
yeah. I could imagine though, so of course it's always environmental dependent and how you grow up and all that kind of stuff. But maybe it is also because Terence needed to really work hard.
Yeah.
Because Chris Bumstead is always above him. And that's why I always think that coming in second is the best thing, or just losing is the best thing that can happen to you in the first initial years. Because it makes it just, if you really want something, it makes you work so much harder for it then. Right. And I think that it's kind of such a blessing in disguise. And we've seen it in so many other sports already, where then there were these kind of people who've always come second place or lost just by a smudge, right? And they just busted their asses off because they wanted that top position. Yeah. They always were a little bit in the shadow of someone else. And then at some point they just like grew to become maybe even the best. And maybe this is also then happening to Terence.
Yeah. No, I think I won't go down this tangent, but it's like, I know you'd agree with this. You can't give like awards to every child and like, you're all winners. It's no. People need to know that like they can lose and get better and fight for that. So
that's also something that we're doing with our kids as well. Because Hugo, he's very much he likes to play the piano, and he's also getting piano lessons. And I don't know how normal it is for kids, but he is always then like saying, yeah, I'm good, right? I'm good. And of course, you're not just like confirming that and be like, oh yeah, beautiful, darling. No. Often we are just like, yeah, this sounds amazing. But you can still improve, right? Just listen here to this, right? If you keep on practicing, you will be able to play this as well. It's kind of, you encourage them, but just enough so that they still have kind of, I don't know, that drive that they want to actually taste more blood. Because I think that you will not do them any kind of favors and just always complimenting them and telling them what a star they are, what a unique individual they are. Because often they aren't, right? Yeah. And that is not as a discouragement or so. I think it's more of a discouragement. Not really, but more of a demotivation if you just pretend that they are. And then at some point, they figure out that you've just been lying to them the entire time.
That's why people talk about kind of you don't want to be a big fish in a small bowl. You want to kind of be a small fish in like the ocean and see all the people in your environment who are better than you because it drives you to be better.
Yeah.
It completely makes sense. Nice. I guess we can wrap this one up.
Yeah, I said to Katie, like, I'll make it short here, 45 minutes today.
No, we ended up rambling.
Yeah,
it's all good.
But I had so much to talk about after the week, and I guess we leave it here. So guys, for the next week, I think it's a good time then to ask for some questions. Then next week, we will do a little bit of a Q&A. Of course, give you a little bit of an update, of course, but a little bit of a Q&A. So feel free to leave some questions here in the comment section below. For those listening over on Spotify, of course, you need to probably come over to YouTube as well. Just type in the question here in the comment section below so that we can cover it, talk about it next week as best as we can. And then, I guess we take it from there. Of course, as always, leave a like, leave a subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section below. That also may not be a question. You don't have to just only put in questions. If you're interested in coaching, of course, head over to revivestronger.com/online-coaching, and then you can always jump on a call with us if you need any kind of help with training, nutrition, or hopefully both at the same time, because that's how we roll in. So, guys, thank you very much, and I guess I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Fantastic. Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality and we know how to do it. And we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.